Today we will take a brief look at how China and India opened their economies to the global market, ushering in years of growth in the past 30 years. As we talked about in the lesson on China after Mao, China was suffering from a weak and slow economy, with little growth in production. However, in the late 1970s, China began to institute economic reforms to allow for greater ingenuity and economic freedom. One of these reforms was an open-door policy that was instituted in December of 1978. As part of this policy, China moved from trading mainly with the Soviet Union and its satellite states to trading with the West and allowing Western technology and investment to enter the nation. As part of this policy, China set up 4 economic zones in southern China that would utilize tax incentives to attract foreign investment and businesses. With these reforms, many businesses came to China for the incentives and cheap labor. As a result, China's economy took off. Since the 1980s, China is considered to have one of the fastest periods of economic growth in world history. On the graph to the right, you can see how in a 20-year period from 1978 to 1998, China's gross domestic product rose from about $100 billion to almost $1 trillion. Then, in 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization, a world organization that sets rules for the world trade to promote free trade across the globe between nations. China hoped that this membership would help to facilitate continued growth and reform in its economy. From the graph on the left, notice the growth rate that China had in the first decade of the 21st century. China's average growth of around 10%, while the United States' average growth is around 2%. Now, the United States sees lower growth rates since they already had an efficiently run economy with top technology. China can see higher growth since they have more potential to grow by attaining technologies already created through the global market. Take a moment to look at the measure of China's growth in these graphs. The graph on the far left shows the GDP per capita per person in China. This is much lower in China in comparison to its GDP due to the fact that China has a lot of people in the nation. This is one way of many others to measure how the people from China benefit from GDP growth. Similar to China, India has also restricted itself to global trade throughout the 20th century. India received its independence from Britain in 1947 and wanted to cut ties with the Western world economically. However, in the 1990s, India was suffering an economic crisis in part due to its lack of trade. India sought the help of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, a world organization that loans money to support developing nations. The IMF agreed to help India if India agreed to open itself to foreign investment and remove trade barriers. India took the deal. The help of the IMF and the reduction in barriers helped India to become a top outsourcing center for IT, call centers, and software development. Outsourcing is when a business will buy a specific service from another business or from a group of workers in another nation where the labor is cheaper. As a result of the outsourcing, India began to run a massive trade surplus, bringing in more money than they were spending. However, this was due in large part, to the fact that India places some of the highest tariffs, which are taxes on imports, in the world, as seen in the graph on the right. Overall, global trade has benefited India extensively, as they have seen their GDP and GDP per capita skyrocket in the past 20 years, as seen in this graph. Although GDP per capita has grown extensively, India still falls well short of the United States' per capita GDP, which measured around $65,281 in 2019.